Brothers and sisters, if anyone is caught in sin, you who are spiritual must restore a brother in a spirit of gentleness. When someone's caught in sin, you who are spiritual restore him in a spirit of gentleness. It means when they fall, you pick them up. So how do you know if you're spiritual or not? How do you know if you can be the one to reach down and pick them up? Well, I think that I'm pretty spiritual. I have a feeling. I feel like I'm a spiritual person. The only thing is, as I go to try to pick that person up, what if I reach down and I say, "Oh, look at what you're in. Look at this mess that you have made for yourself. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that you are in this mire. I'm shocked." And you know what? I would never do something like that. I would never. I mean, I'm better than that. You should know better. See, my goodness or goodness that's a part of my life is not a fruit of my thoughts. Goodness is not a fruit or result of my feelings. And goodness is definitely not the result of someone else. See, if goodness is a result of my thoughts, then the moment I look at someone else, I can look at them and think, at least I'm not a murderer. At least I'm not a thief. At least I'm not a liar. At least I'm not this person. I'm a pretty good person. You see the danger of allowing the fruit of our goodness, quote unquote, to come from any other source than God. So as we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit this week, goodness is one of them. And it is the result of God alone. If I think that it can come from anywhere else, I'm fooling myself. In fact, Jesus talked about this in Luke chapter 18. And if you've got your Bibles, I want to encourage you, please turn there with me. Luke 18 talks about two people we're going to discuss tonight. A Pharisee and a tax collector. And just to give a background, a tax collector during this time is a traitor to his own people. He's someone who stabbed his friends in the back. He's someone who is just the lowest of the low. He is just evil in the sight of everyone. And so the fact that Jesus uses him as an example is someone that can look at least I'm not a tax collector. And so that's really what is happening here. It says, Jesus told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector." So where did he find his goodness? In what he wasn't. He found his goodness in others by saying, at least I'm not that person. So the fact that Jesus is talking about it means it's very relevant. And it means that you and I, we can look at other people and think we're really good because of what we're not. But that is not the fruit of the Spirit. That is not goodness. That's just the absence of evil. But what happens if you do become that? Well, then what you thought was good, you've just fallen as low as can be. Or what if you look at someone as your example for good and you place someone up here and say, I could never be that person. I could never be like that person there. Why even try? See, if we allow other people to be our source of goodness, it's going to fail. Why? Because what happens if that person you've elevated fails themselves? Then they come down, then your faith is shattered. It's gone. But we're told, you who are spiritual, restore a brother in a spirit of gentleness. Why? If they're caught in sin. But sometimes we seek to restore ourselves when we find them down there, because that means if I can say that I'm not like them, that means I don't have to change, but I'm pretty good. That's why bad news sells. That's why any news you're going to hear is going to be bad, because at least we're not like that. And ironically, in a very evil and twisted way, it gives comfort. And that is twisted, and it's not right. That's why goodness comes from God. So how is it that we can restore someone in a spirit of gentleness? Well, I think Paul was a great example of this. And in 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 21, he talks about an ethic, something that he did all the time to try to restore other people. He said, though I'm free from all, I've made myself a servant to all that I might win more of them. Later on down in verse 21, he says, to those without law, I became as without law. Remaining under the law of Christ and not being outside the law of God, I won those outside the law. He's talking about Gentiles, but let's apply it to today. How can you reach people who are without law? How can you reach people who are caught in sin? How can you reach people who are lost? Well, he broke a law. To those without law, I became as without law. Well, I've got this hacky sack, and I had a reason for bringing it out here. This idea of dropping it and going to pick someone up. It's a simple idea. But there's a story I want to share with you. Bear with me. When I was 19 years old, I was able I was invited to come and live with a family in Scotland, a preacher for the Cumbernauld Church of Christ, Graham MacDonald. And so I was so excited, and I remember it was new, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to work with their youth outreach. But he warned me very quickly. He says, Richard, we've got a problem. He said, we've got a problem because we've got a big gang problem. They called them NEDs, NEDs, non-educated delinquents. Is that fair? Now, I said I'm talking about Scotland called them that. In England, they're called chavs. Now, the church didn't call them Neds, but what would happen was these kids, I remember meeting kids that were 10 years old all the way up to 18 in groups, and all they did was get up to no good. So in fact, this group that was in their area, they were finding people walking to church and they were beating them up. In fact, one of the dads was trying to defend his son, and they took a chair leg that had the spike in it and hit him in the head, caused brain damage to the dad. So it's very serious, and he's telling me about this. So come Sunday, he says, oh, Richard, we'll see you there. And I walked to the building, and I'm going, why did you tell me this? I walked to the building. So I was preaching the first time, and I was wearing a full suit, because very respectful there. I was wearing my full suit. I had my Bible under my arm, and it's a very big, Bible here. And so people knew who I was, especially as I'm walking. And there's this passageway that it's about from here all the way down to that door. And I'm walking back. On one side, I've got a hedge, and another side, I've got a retaining wall. About halfway there, I see about 14 or 15 kids. One of them turns and he looks at my direction, and then all of the faces turned and looked. And I'm going, well, this is just great. This is great. I'm going to die in Scotland. And so I'm walking there, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I thought, okay, as they get closer, one of them, he's just staring me down, and he's just looking at me, and his accent's staring at me. His stare has an accent. So he's staring at me, and I'm scared. And so I walk up, and they encircle me, and I'm thinking in my mind, this Bible's very big. I could smack one of them in the face, and I could take off running, and I could get to the building, and I'd be fine. You think I did that? I did not do that. Come to find out, they call Christians Bible bashers, by the way, and so I would have erased all doubt in their mind that I was a Bible basher. I'm not kidding. So if I went to smack one of them and try to get away, would I have been trying to restore someone caught in sin in a spirit of gentleness? Well, I wouldn't have been restoring them. I would have been trying to restore myself. I would have been trying to take care of myself in that situation. And so what happened was I ended up taking my hacky sack out of my pocket, because I had one. And so I took it out of my pocket and I just tossed it like that. All right? And so, all right, okay, Ms. Harp, can you please turn it? Just give it back to me. Because what happens is the young man grabs it, and he goes, what's this? It's a bag of beans. And I said, no, it's a hacky sack. He said, what's a happy sack? I said, no, it's a hacky sack. Here, just toss it to me. So he tossed it, and so I just started kicking it. And the kids are like, oh, geez a try, man. That's great. They're excited. So the circle became the hacky sack circle. That's the game. What you do is everyone starts kicking it. And we started, and I got their names. And I said, well, guys, I got to go to church. And I said, eventually after I got their names, and they're like, oh, that's great. All right, we'll see you later. Just bring the hacky sack next time. For the rest of the summer, I worked with these kids. And it was amazing. So what's interesting is I broke a law. I broke several laws. For one, and this sounds so silly, but I broke which law? By kicking it up. Law of gravity. How many of us, when you get a balloon, you're like, oh, like a cat. Oh, yay. You want to keep it off the ground. I broke a law. But did it break the law of Christ? No, it did not. But I broke another law. See, one of the members came up to me, put his arm around me. He says, Richard, I'm so thankful for what you're doing with these Neds. And he did. Call them Neds. He says, if you don't watch it, they'll kill you. He said that. See, he saw that these were untouchables, that you don't even need to try, so why even begin? So by even working with them and just sitting there with them, I broke a law. I broke an understanding. But what was cool was I could open my voice. I just opened my mouth and I started talking like that. That's what they heard. I'm telling you, that's what they heard. Because they're like, you're not from a reindeer, man. That's what they heard. And it broke another law because you're like, you're not from around here. And immediately there was opportunities. So there's so many different small things that was an opportunity to reach them, right? So what I also found was I always had my Bible with me. And so what they did is they wanted to know why I was there. And that led into asking questions about God. People who are caught in sin, they recognize the darkness. But they also recognize when someone's trying to help them. And they want to know more. And so you who are spiritual, where do we get the spiritual? Remember, do you know the context to that? That was Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1. And just a couple of verses before it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there's no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us walk by the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any sin, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. This Spirit isn't you. It's the Spirit of God. And if you have those, people will be brought out of that mire. They will be brought out of where they've fallen. And that is the most beautiful concept. And that leaves us to that second person. And then the lesson is yours. Remember we talked about the Pharisee who said, I'm so glad I'm not like these other people. And I'm so glad I'm especially not like this tax collector. But the tax collector standing far off. Remember, he was standing over here. The Pharisee was standing over there. So he was standing over here, and he says, standing far off, he would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but he beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, Jesus says, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. We can try to justify ourselves by somebody else's stupidity, and that's just as stupid. We can try to justify and try to make our goodness come from our thoughts, our feelings, our friends, or that even stranger you see on TV. And we can try to have this feeling of self-justification. It will not work. But if you want to go back to your house, just like he went to his house justified, then it takes humility. It takes an inward look at ourselves and realize, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Without God, I'm nothing. And that takes humility. It takes us a willingness to look inward and say, the things that I've been doing are separating me from God. And God, I want to turn to you. So that's something that camp is offering. We're going to have a song we're about to sing to make sure that we're thinking straight on the straight and narrow. And that we're here, if any of you are caught, that's the thing, working with these children, they came and freely asked amazing questions that were challenging to me. But I said every time, what does the Bible say? And it had the answer. If you've got questions that you're struggling with and you want to go to your house justified, please come and talk to me. Thank y'all so much.